Hello, dear learners. Welcome to Exploring an Understanding of How Research Supports Yoga for Mental Health. Let's set forth on a journey of exploration, gently weaving the threads of research into the fabric of our own knowledge and skills. So whether you're a therapist, a teacher, or simply a seeker of knowledge, I invite you to embrace these moments with a sense of gentle curiosity and openness. I'm your host, Judy Thompson, and in today's segment, we will be exploring the publication Neurobiological Basis for the Application of Yoga in Drug Addiction, published April 2024 in the journal Frontiers in Psychiatry. Authored by Nilkamal Singh. In this episode, we'll explore how addiction affects the human brain's pathways. We'll examine the benefits of yoga beyond physical fitness, particularly how it influences our neurobiology. Our focus is on addiction recovery and recent research highlighting yoga's ability to rebuild and rejuvenate the mind. Addiction is a complex and chronic brain disease that impacts millions of people. Neuroscientists describe addiction in 3 critical stages: binge/intoxication, withdrawal/negative effect, and preoccupation/anticipation. Each stage involves distinct neurobiological processes that can gradually lead to a persistent cycle. In the first stage, binge/intoxication, is where the individual engages in the excessive use of substances, leading to a brief but intense euphoria due to a surge in dopamine levels. This high is what the brain remembers and craves, setting the stage for a potential lifetime of pursuit. When the effects of the intoxicant wear off, the individual may find themselves in the withdrawal/negative effect stage, marked by an emotional and physical low. The same brain systems that produced feelings of pleasure now swing to discomfort, anxiety, and an acute sense of lacking. The reward pathways that were once receptive become desensitized, whereas pathways associated with stress become overactive, fostering an internal sense of dis-ease or biologic imbalance. The final stage, preoccupation/anticipation, involves a heightened sense of craving and obsession with obtaining the substance. At this point, the incentive to use again becomes more about avoiding withdrawal than seeking pleasure. This is where voluntary substance use becomes compulsive. Continued use leads to significant alterations in the brain's reward circuitry. Dopamine receptors critical for experiencing pleasure and motivation become fewer and less sensitive, pushing the individual to seek more substances to try and achieve the once attainable high. At the same time, the person experiences changes in the prefrontal cortex, which impacts executive function, and these are the very skills we rely on for decision-making, impulse control, and adherence to social norms. These changes not only worsen the already compromised inhibitory control, but also show why breaking the addiction cycle can be so challenging. Understanding these changes is crucial because it guides treatment strategies that seek to reestablish neurological stability, offering hope against the persistent cycles of addiction. This investigation clarifies why science is essential in acknowledging addiction as a disease, not a choice or a lack of willpower. Acknowledging this understanding is essential in continued research into how yoga can integrate into the framework of recovery and addiction management. Yoga has long been valued for its mind-body connection, embracing a holistic approach that encompasses a variety of practices. These are not merely physical postures, but also encompass deeper ethical principles known as yamas and niyamas. To truly benefit from yoga, one must engage in these practices, along with breathing techniques called pranayama, purification rituals known as kriyas, and the cultivation of a focused mind through the practices of pratyahara, dharana, and ultimately meditation or dhyana. In considering the mechanisms at play when yoga is used during addiction recovery, it's hypothesized that yoga's top-down mechanism influences the higher-order brain processes, the very ones that govern emotions, cognition, and behavior. This means that yoga, through meditative practices, can enhance executive function, foster emotional control, and improve cognitive processing. Concurrently, the bottom-up mechanism of yoga interacts directly with the periphery of the body, our tissues and organs, By controlling breath and maintaining postures, one stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, encouraging a state of calm and reducing the physiological stress response. This could be pivotal in addiction recovery, as stress dysregulation is a core feature of the addiction cycle. It is thought that by working to recalibrate the brain's reward system through the dampening of the stress response and improving executive function control, yoga can be an important adjunctive resource as a non-pharmacological tool in the journey towards recovery and well-being. It's important to understand the significant role dopamine plays in the reward circuitry of the brain. Dopamine is a chemical messenger and neurotransmitter that is produced in the brain. It affects cells in different parts of the brain and plays a role in many body functions, including the reward system. Dopamine regulates the reward value of not just addictive substances, but also everyday pleasantries like practicing self-care, eating, sunshine, interacting socially, and achieving goals. In addiction, the reinforcing effects of drugs are mediated by their impact on the brain's dopamine system, creating a surge in dopamine levels that links to feelings of euphoria during the initial drug intoxication stage. However, with persistent substance abuse, there's a marked reduction in dopamine neuronal firing and an upsurge in stress, leading to a state of diminished reward capacity. It's not surprising that craving and compulsive drug-seeking behavior become more pronounced as the dopamine D1 receptors are increasingly implicated in the reinforcement and conditioning of the addiction cycle. Another fascinating development in addiction neurobiology is the decrease in dopamine D2 receptors, a change that correlates with reduced activity in brain regions like the orbitofrontal cortex, anterior cingulate gyrus, and dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. These areas are integrally linked with executive functions and inhibitory control, which means a reduction in D2 receptors could be strongly associated with increased compulsive behavior and an inability to resist urges. This is where yoga comes into the picture. Important research has revealed that practices like Raj Yoga meditation, which is an open-eye meditation technique, may lead to structural changes in the brain, particularly in areas that regulate reward and happiness. Studies have demonstrated an increase in gray matter volume in the superior frontal gyrus and other regions involved in reward processing in meditators compared to non-meditators. What's even more intriguing, these changes have been positively associated with the duration of abstinence in substance users. Additionally, meditation has been shown to induce an increase in endogenous dopamine release, which suggests a potential reversal of addiction-induced changes in the dopamine system. Specifically, during Yoga Nidra meditation, there has been observed an increase in striatal dopamine binding to D2 receptors, which is linked to reward-based behaviors and may have significant implications for managing compulsive behavior in drug addiction. From a neurobiological standpoint, these findings indicate that yoga can play a pivotal role in not just counterbalancing the dysfunctional reward system in addiction, but also in restoring it to a healthier state. While research is ongoing, these preliminary insights shine a hopeful light on the positive impact of yoga and meditation on the complex and multifaceted interplay of neurobiology and addiction. Given the damaging effects of addiction, where withdrawal symptoms and negative impacts are present, stress clearly drives the continued drug-seeking behavior, facilitating the transition from casual use to dependency. Drug cessation is a major stressor, triggering the brain's stress system. However, yoga provides a hope for those recovering from addiction. It is important to consider how yoga, especially meditation and pranayama, breathing techniques, can beneficially affect the autonomic nervous system and may help reduce stress factors in the addiction cycle. Yoga leads to increased vagal dominance, meaning more action from the parasympathetic nervous system, our natural mechanism for restoring calm. Studies show that through measures like heart rate variability, which is an indicative sign of the state of the autonomic nervous system, that regular pranayama practice reduces the low-frequency component of heart rate variability and boosts the high-frequency component of heart rate variability. This suggests stronger parasympathetic activity and a body state that is more resilient against stress. Additional studies have examined the effect of yoga on stress indicators. Specifically, research on Sudarshan Kriya Yoga shows its effectiveness in lowering stress hormones, plasma cortisol and adrenocorticotropic hormone, in patients with alcohol dependence after 2 weeks of practice. The reason for these hormone changes appears to be stimulation of the respiratory vagus nerve. According to Gerritsen and Band's 2018 model, yoga's slow and prolonged exhales, especially in movement practices, pranayama, and meditation, stimulate the vagal nerve. This, along with the calming physical patterns produced by slow, restful breathing, signals relaxation to the central nervous system through the vagal afferents, creating a widespread sense of calm throughout the mind and body. In our brain, inhibitory control is essential for executive function. It's what allows us to ignore short-term temptations and focus on long-term objectives. Individuals with addiction often have a weakened ability to self-regulate, leading to continuous drug-seeking behavior. But could we enhance this brain function? Yoga may provide a way. Yoga isn't just about the poses commonly seen in the media. It's a full mind-body practice, including mindful breathing, meditation, and intentional movement. These elements are key in improving cognitive functions, especially those that control self-regulation and impulse management. Researchers have discovered how yoga improves brain function. Chronic drug use damages the neural structure of the anterior cingulate cortex, dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, and orbitofrontal cortex, which control our self-restraint. Yoga, through concentration, breathing, and meditation, repairs and supports healing in these areas. For example, the prefrontal cortex, which manages decision-making and self-control, becomes more active in yoga practitioners, even under stress or cravings. This suggests that yoga not only increases neural activity, but also helps to strengthen the brain's self-regulation capacity. Electrophysiological studies, including those looking at event-related potentials, which are non-invasive brain measurements that record how the brain responds to specific sensory, motor, or cognitive events, are making clear the immediate impacts of yoga on brain function. In the context of addiction, research indicates that just one yoga session can improve inhibitory control among smokers dealing with nicotine addiction, marking engagement of brain functions essential for self-regulation. This effect is not fleeting. Consistent yoga practice leads to lasting alterations in brain structure. MRI scans show that experienced meditators have a thicker prefrontal cortex, suggesting that yoga strengthens the brain's defense against addiction's progressive challenges. Through research, we understand how yoga can serve as a beneficial integrative approach with prolonged benefits. With each intentional breath and focus, yoga heals the brain, but its true value lies in its capacity to restore damaged neural pathways associated with addictions, which allows individuals to create a path to recovery, empowerment, and ultimately reclaiming control over their life. Today we've covered how yoga practice leads to notable changes in the brain, both in structure and function. It increases dopamine pathway activity and improves gray matter volume in important brain areas linked to the reward system. This makes yoga a promising option for non-drug-based treatment and addiction recovery. Yoga doesn't just offer physical benefits, it effectively reprograms the body's stress responses, shifting the autonomic nervous system toward a calming parasympathetic state. Research also shows that yoga helps to decrease stress hormones such as cortisol, playing an important role in stress reduction, and is instrumental in disrupting the cycle of addiction. We've learned that with regular practice, yoga helps improve inhibitory control within addiction neurobiology, thus enhancing executive function and increasing self-regulation. This suggests that yoga can be a beneficial tool in addiction treatment. However, research into yoga's long-term effects around the neurobiology of addiction is still developing and vast. Continued research is required to help explain the mechanisms by which yoga acts as a sustainable, comprehensive treatment modality in addiction recovery. Thank you to the author and publisher for all of the research in this important study, Neurobiological Basis for the Application of Yoga in Drug Addiction, For those eager to continue exploring, or for anyone seeking more in-depth information, additional resources and supplementary materials can be accessed within the links provided in the episode description. As we end our time together, remember to embrace and witness the beauty of life, and within shared experience, be the thread that creates compassion and curiosity for others. Thank you for joining me on this journey in learning how research supports yoga and integrative practices for mental health and well-being. May you find and share beauty and peace on your journey toward wellness.